It's working? All right.
Do you hear us?
Can you guys hear me? All right, we're going to get started. Thank you. I'll just wait for everyone to put their headphones on. All right, so thanks everyone for joining today, this session with Idealo. So firstly, my name's Shane Murray. I'm the field CTO of Monte Carlo, the data observability platform. And today we're talking to Idealo, German e-commerce giant who leverage timely data to give customers across Europe the most desirable and up-to-date prices on a wide variety of products from hundreds of shops. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about their data platform strategy and how they solve for reliability. But I'm going to start actually with actually maybe I'll introduce our guests first. We have Lior and Robin. Lior, could you start maybe by telling us your role at Idealo?
Sure. So I hope so. I'm Lior. I'm the head of product for the data platform, and yeah, with the company for almost a year now.
I'm Robin. I'm working at inventory analytics team. That's basically data engineering team at Idealo, which handles the largest amount of data we've got at Idealo, and I'm there nearly 2 years now.
All right, thank you. And so we'll start with a little provocation for the audience, I think. Just interested by a show of hands, how many of you would say the company you're working at classifies themselves as data-driven, a common term we hear? All right, so maybe 20%, 25%. And how many of you would say you have high trust in data across the company? All right. We'd like to say that. Oh, we got one here, so I'm going to say that's about 5% of the audience. Maybe I'll throw it to Lior, how you think about those two questions at Idealo.
So I think that what we realized very, very quick was that we all say we are data-driven, but we don't understand what it means. And when we talk about data-driven, it's not about being able to have dashboards and play with them. It's actually the question of the trust in the data. When you're arriving in the morning and you're opening your dashboard, how much can you trust what you see in front of you, and what is the amount of work you need to do around it? And I think that this is actually where observability coming into the picture, to actually close this gap in a way that it's allowing us to say to somebody, your data is in the right direction, everything looking great, or there is a fuck up on the way, let's figure out now how we're fixing it. And I think that this is where we understood that data-driven is a very different definition than what we got used to until now.
Yeah. And I guess maybe just to follow up to that, trust can be a pretty ambiguous concept in organizations. How do you think of trust at Idealo and building trust in data?
So this is one of the biggest issues that everybody facing, and this really to figure out how you're taking the data set that you're receiving in the morning and you monitor it in the right way, and also how you're communicating it. And I think that this is where things coming and becoming much more interesting. Mm-hmm. Because it's not enough that an analyst needs to arrive to the office in the morning and say, you can trust it. It needs to be very self-service to whoever wants to use the data in an easy way. And I think this is where this game is starting to change towards more the users.
Yeah, and so trust becomes, in a way, an enabler to self-service and even concepts like data mesh that we're hearing a lot about.
Yes, correct.
And so maybe just taking a step back, I wonder if you could talk me through the major sort of data science and analytics use cases for data at Idealo.
So maybe, Ruben, you can do more as you're doing the inventory. They are the heaviest users of data.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about price comparison at Idealo, so that's the basic. We need all the offers and from the merchants, have to structure it, and that's one of our biggest problems or issues we're trying to face now is how we cluster those offers. I mean, we have a lot of manpower, that are manually putting things together, but that's not scalable. So we had some tools and stuff, and now we are implementing models that learn how to cluster offers, basically. Yeah, I think that's a good example. And
one of the key value drivers,
yeah.
Lior.
Maybe I can add to this. So if you think about it, a price comparison, having assortment, and it needs to sell. That's the job for this machine. It's users coming in, and user needs to come out with the information that they were searching for. And these were data becoming a much the super important part of this machine. If you don't have the right offer at the right time with the right parameters for the user, you lost it. And this means that either he's not going to come back because he didn't find what he wanted, or to bring him back going to be a much more expensive process than if you had something to give him immediately. And I think that this is where data becoming a super important component in whatever we do.
And so maybe you could tell me a little bit about the kind of scope and components of the data platform that supports Idealo and supports these use cases.
So in the infrastructure itself, we have on the one side, we have the ingestion. So this is how we're collecting all the data and bringing it on board, which we're using the regular AWS environment with Kafka placements and iFlume and so on and so on. And this is basically one part to bring it into the data lake. And then from the data lake, basically there is a process where we're starting to pre-processing the data, preparing it, monitoring it, and then slowly also preparing it for other teams to be able to consume it. And this is more of Presto, more of other types of infrastructure like Athena and so on that we're actually enabling users to do as much as the bot.
Got it. And so those teams that are using the data platform are sitting around the company and in different business domains?
Yeah, so we are basically in the center, we enabling the infrastructure, and we see ourselves now more and more also as the enforcers of quality of data and how you're creating this universe of marketplace where people can come, find their data sets, and then figure out which one they can trust, which one they cannot, which one they can use and to what purpose. As well as when we're talking about dashboards, which is the end result, this is actually where everybody looking at, how you're making sure that there is some certification on it, that whenever somebody open a dashboard, he knows this is the dashboard I need to use to actually make a decision, rather than just it's another dashboard with some numbers that maybe something going to be there.
Got it. And so I guess this question's for both of you, but when you started to think about data quality and data trust and how you'd solve for those problems at Idealo, what were the sort of top 3 issues you were tackling?
Ruben can tell you a lot.
Yeah, I think the first one is what you mentioned before. It's a reliability, and then we had the problem that our data is kind of a black box. I mean, when we're talking about the offer data, we're talking about nearly 2 billion offers, and we didn't know anything about the data quality. We know if the offers are there or if not, and afterwards if there were problems, price problems or something, but we couldn't tell you about the data quality at all. So that's one of the main issues we've got, and we try to solve right now. Would you like to add something?
There are many issues. No, but when we're talking about data, when we're working in a decentralized world, I think that's when things starting to get fuzzy and more problematic. And this is where you need to have better monitoring. You need to have better opportunity to discover the data in a better way, because you see users that are disconnected from the data producer, so that whoever consumed the data at the end doesn't know where it was produced and how it was produced. And I think that this is where the challenges are actually sitting.
Also, let me add one more point. We've got a lot of data dependencies inside our company, so upstream and downstream. So one of our main issues is that the upstream data, which is used downstream, that it is correct. And if not, we got notified about it, or there's some process in place, so you don't calculate with wrong data. So basically lineage is kind of important for us.
Yeah, so let's go into some more detail on that. You now have in place a data observability program within your team. How has that changed how you operate, and what's the workflow around detecting and resolving incidents?
So the best thing is that we've got with Monte Carlo automatic monitors, so like freshness and volume. So we didn't have to do anything. So our team, you had to set up Monte Carlo, but me not. And then we have like field health monitoring, and we are now in a phase where we try to learn what our data is about, and if there are any anomalies in our data that Monte Carlo detects, then we try to understand, is it really an anomaly, or is that something our data should look like, and something like that. And like I said, lineage is important, so notifications about upstream fails are kind of important. We also had some cases a few months ago and where there was some data, but it was kind of not full there. And the problem here is that we got some checks that if there's data, we can run the next steps. But if there's incomplete data, then there was no check at all. And Monte Carlo detected that volume anomaly, and that helped a lot. And now we got checks also for this in place. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so you mentioned some sort of freshness and volume checks, but you also talked about field health monitoring. Can you say a little bit more about the kind of use cases for that at Idealo?
Yeah, like I said before, we don't have use cases right now for field health, but we try to learn because, I mean, if you're talking about prices, the first thing what comes in your mind is like price errors can mess everything up. So we try to, have some checks on price anomalies we don't see or the analysts don't see, but maybe can be detected by a model. And as I also said, we have a really huge data set with the offers, so it's basically learning what's in there and understand what kind of distributions we've got and how that changes over time. So field health for us in the phase right now is learning, data profiling, basically.
Yeah. And so I guess if you look at the program you've put in place, how do you think about the impact on data quality and on, essentially how you think about reliability and the effort you're spending on it at Idealo?
So maybe I can answer on this. Data quality is only one part out of 3 stages as I see it for data. So the first part is really to monitor it, to make sure it's working, to make sure it's there and available and fresh as much as possible. Then the second part of it is the discovery of the data. This is where you're basically putting it in some marketplace where people can come and think about it like a bazaar, right? When you go into the bazaar, you can see many things, many shops, and you can pick whatever you want to buy, but there is different qualities as well to what you're going to get there. It's not always the best, highest quality you're going to get, and this is where you need to know what you want to take. And I think this is more future of where we want to go towards. We want to be able to actually show you this bazaar with all of the data sets and tell you this is the high quality, this low quality, this medium quality, and give the user the decision how he goes and use this data and to what purposes. And of course, from there to sign kind of an SLA, because if you're becoming a user, if you bought something, there need to be some guarantee that this data is available for the long term. And this, again, where we're coming back to the observability and for the monitoring of the data, because that's the most important part. That whoever producing the product will make sure that he aware to what happened. And then the third layer, and I think that is what binding it all together, is the self-serve. So how you making sure that people that are not technical, they don't know how to use Presto SQL queries, or they don't know how to log in into the systems or UI or whatever out there, and they have the ability to use it, but at the same time they have the right trust. So it's like going back to this monitoring. When monitoring existing and there is a marketplace, you can enable basically all the users to use it in a quite easy way. And I think that this is the future that we're looking going forward. And also on the way that we trying to avoid the case that there is a lot of data running out there that nobody knows why it's there.
Yeah.
Like 5 revenue tables, which one is the right one?
And so just to kind of frame that back to you, I mean, you talked about trust being this paramount importance at Idealo, and it sounds like the solution is part setting expectations with these SLAs, accountability for the data and those SLAs, and then communicating it to the users where they are through business intelligence, through discovery tooling. That's the future state you're headed towards. Yeah.
Yep. So that's exactly what we want to do whenever. So one of the things that I noticed many companies I was working with is that there is a data producer that's sitting somewhere in the organization, and there is an insight producers or insight creator that needs to be the dashboard. And in most cases, they don't have a line of communication. And this is where you need to connect and create some kind of a contract between them, that connecting the insight creator to the data producer and making sure that they both aware of what it's being used for, how it's being used for, and why is it important for it to be available.
I think it's a great vision for building trust in data and truly becoming data-driven. I guess before we go to questions, one last question for you. What's on the roadmap ahead for the data platforms group?
So as we see it, first of all, is to wrap this marketplace in a much stronger structure that actually forcing everybody to go through it. And then meaning putting monitoring and SLAs for the data that's existing there. And then the second part is what we're going towards, a data economic model. So it's not enough only to have data, we also want to know what is the value of it. So we're paying money to store it and use it. What is the expected return on investment? And this is what we're going to try to explore next year more and more deep, and really understand what is the value of 2 million or 2 milliard offers, and what is the return on investment that we can see out of it, and what happened with millions of sessions that are happening every day. Are they actually returning the investment or not on actually tracking it and processing it?
And I've heard return on investment's a big topic amongst data leaders these days. How do you measure that data platform's value? How do you measure the impact you're having on the organization?
Exactly, because today when I'm going to my managing director and I'm going to tell him I need another 100,000 euros, he doesn't understand why I need it.
Yeah.
He doesn't see it as something that is feasible for him. And this is where we need to make it much more connected. So by storing this data, that's the value we're producing for the organization, not having it meaning this is what you're going to lose. And it's making it much more easier to go and argue actually for more systems or less systems, or as well to more storage or less storage. And this is where things needs to be much more communicated.
Okay, so I'd love to get a couple of questions from the audience. Who's got one?
Of the 5 pillars of Monte Carlo,
We cannot hear it.
Oh,
Can you bring me also a headphone?
1, 2. Now joining the poor people.
of the 5 pillars of Monte Carlo, which is the most important for you at Idealo? And why?
Thanks. From the 5 pillars, I would say the observability is the first, the most important one. So the lineage of data. I think that's the most important as I see it.
For us, that's weird.
It's weird.
It's weird if you're
No.
talking. For us, also really important is the discovery, because we're working together with analysts and they have to understand the data. And if nothing is described, then nobody can use data at all. So,
They gave you.
yeah, that's pretty awesome. Yeah,
Freshness.
freshness is quite important. And volume, I think freshness and volume go together kind of.
I think the thing I've found with freshness is, especially as organizations have moved to big, fast data movements, it's less about, I don't know if people are familiar with the data quality DQM programs of sort of 10 years ago, but they were very focused on accuracy of data. And with the volumes you're facing, freshness and the speed of response you have in your program, freshness becomes the primary thing. Any more questions? Yes.
Microphone.
All right, I'm going to try. Oh, yeah, it's weird when you can hear yourself. I'm going to take that off. Yeah, so you mentioned this data marketplace, which sounds really interesting. I was wondering how you were thinking about actually serving up the consumers of that data, so the people that actually need to use that and build stuff off the back of that.
So the marketplace, as we see it, is basically the access point for everything that's going to happen in the company. And it means that data comes in from wherever source, whoever producing it. So even analysts, if they're creating a dashboard, it needs to go into this marketplace. And then from there, it should be available to anybody else who wants to consume it. And this is where we see it as becoming kind of the place to go, even if you don't create anything with the data, but you still need to understand what's going on there. And the idea behind it is to add also the layers of freshness inside it, the layer of basically what is the quality as we see it, based on the last few weeks, if it's stable or not. And we're going to create some kind of a structure that's saying that there is certified data, there is data as a product, and there is, sorry for saying it, close your ears, shitty data. All of us have it. And we need to catalog it and make sure that people are aware of what they're touching when they're touching it.
Awesome, thank you.
And I think we saw one more question down here.
Yeah, it's a bit weird to say it like this. Okay, so for me, I have two-part question. The first one is around the observability. So how do you define the coverage? Like, for example, you have thousands of tables. How will you say, like, which tables need to have more monitors, which can just have, freshness and volume? How you do that kind of category, And the second part question is around the SLAs and the contracts, which you mentioned. Like, who defines these contracts and how it's like the producers and consumers, they work on that?
You want to answer?
Yeah, I can answer at least the first part. So Monte Carlo brings some automatic monitors, so you don't have to worry about ranking tables, which one you measure against freshness or volumes. That's all set. Everything what's in your data catalog is already covered. And then you decide for yourself what's your most used table. I mean, you have all those statistics from Monte Carlo where they count the SQL queries or the Presto queries running on those tables. So you have kind of a ranking, which tables are more used, which not. And there's also kind of a score, which is calculated. I mean, you know about the score, how it is calculated, but there's one, so you have kind of measurements which you can apply on the tables and decide on which tables you set something up. But basically, put on everything, put on every table monitors, quite good. At least you know something about that table. You want to say something to the second part?
On the second part? So the second part is we need to look also on the quality or the type of the data. So what is it being used for? Is it a dashboard? Is it a data set? Is it just a table that's floating out there? And based on it, you're creating this ranking system. And a very simple answer right now, because we're still investigating, to be honest.
The question was about the SLOs, who defines it, right?
The SLAs, who defines it? This is going to be hard-coded, let's call it. So it's going to be basically defined by a group of people, like a data governance. They're going to set what it means based on the ranking of the data, what is the SLA that needs to be attached to it. High usage will most likely going to have a much stricter SLAs than something that is using once a month or once a year.
Okay, any final questions? Yeah.
Hi, folks. Great talk, by the way. My question is around the marketplace and is interesting to me personally is because we're also embarking on a journey to build out this elusive marketplace. And I'm curious to understand, in the absence of a marketplace, how is the company organically serving that purpose at the moment? So how are folks be able to search and discover the data in the absence of a marketplace? So how are things growing organically, or what happens practically now if I'm a business user X and I want to understand what data sets I have available to me? How do I go about doing that at the moment in the absence of the marketplace?
Do you want to answer that? How are you doing it today?
It's talking to people, basically. I mean, there are some documentation in place, and we're working together with analysts, and they say, yeah, we need that and that data. So it's more like, I mean, we've got that data lake, and everyone can exit it. And some tables are described, some not. So, I mean, if you don't know what data you use, currently it's like going to the data producers and asking around who produce data I can use. Yeah.
Maybe I can add to this. We're working in a hybrid world, and this is becoming even more complex because we don't sit anymore in one office. I cannot just go and put posters or placards or whatever and say, it's like, this is what I'm producing, and this is what I'm searching for and trying to find the matches anymore. When it's becoming completely hybrid, sometimes you don't even know who is producing your data. There is complete disconnection, and this is where you need to bridge it. So there is a lot of conference pages that floating around and trying to describe data sets or requests for data, which some people can understand it, some not. It's not an easy thing. This is why the marketplace is becoming a very, very important component, because there needs to be one place to go to.
And I think I'll just make a comment on that. I think one of the key things of making this marketplace valuable is the fact that you've built trust into it, right? So trust is this thing that flows through the marketplace, given that they have these SLAs, they're putting, whether it's traffic lights or the ways that you're communicating quality through that marketplace. So I think that's all we have time for. Thanks to everyone in the audience. If you'd like to chat to people at Monte Carlo, there's a booth. I'm going to point somewhere over there, 224, against the back wall over there. So feel free to come talk or talk to our great speakers, Lior and Robin. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.